Hey, Larken Rose here. A lot of people will kind of automatically judge a message based on what they think of the messenger. I've talked about that a million times. It's kind of a commonly understood phenomenon. And when people start to get into learning about anarchism and a stateless society and stuff like that, they are exposed to people who believe those things. And often that happens in the setting of some social media where there's back and forth and there's discussion, whether you're talking Facebook or YouTube or whatever. I know those are two ancient ones. Yes, I'm still on them. I'm not on those newfangled platforms. I'm too old. I don't understand them. So if a normal person goes there and they see the discussion back and forth, a lot of them are going to be struck by, pardon my language in this video, how many assholes there are in the discussion. And it's kind of an amazing phenomenon. It's not at all unique to anarchism. Or voluntaryism. It's just sort of a rule. I mean, Jordan Peterson's even talked about how when people are anonymous in a discussion anyway, their inner asshole can totally come out and they can be obnoxious jerks to a level that they wouldn't nearly dare to be in real life around real people. And so if you get the impression that in the real world that would be the discussion around, voluntaryism or anything else, it can totally turn people off and scare people away and go, who are all these crazy people? There's also the phenomenon that the loudest and most obnoxious and the people who are determined to be obnoxious are the ones who keep going, and they often either intentionally or just incidentally intimidate into silence a whole bunch of people who just meant well, regardless of what side they're on and where they are on understanding things, who are just like, this discussion is psychotic and I'm going to run away. And you see that more and more on less and less controlled platforms, because on platforms where you can block people and have private pages and stuff, the assholes get rejected and shunned, and everybody says get lost. You can go rant your stupid whininess on your own page all you want, but you don't get to do it on my page. And that's freedom of association and freedom of disassociation. And it's really dang useful. Now, if you want a place where anybody can say whatever they want, that's another very useful thing to exist. But if you want decent, normal people to engage in the discussion, if there are no limits on what people can want, usually the most loud, obnoxious assholes are the last ones who are going to be there, because all the decent human beings are just going to go, well, I don't really want to try to have a discussion here because there's this idiocy going on. For example, I post a bunch of things on YouTube. I don't ever ban someone just for disagreeing, but if they're throwing out stupid troll noise and cluttering up everything with obnoxious, irrelevant, garbage, then I'll delete them, because you're not adding anything to anything. You're just noise. You're just an obnoxious annoyance. So you get to leave. And then if they're doing actual, slander or harassment or something, I'll occasionally block somebody for that. Same general thing on Facebook. And somebody, I should probably know who. Somebody posts my videos. This isn't a complaint. This is I appreciate this. Somebody posts my videos over on BitChute too. I did it myself for a while, and I told somebody else they could, and now I on all the platforms. I'm an old man. I can't keep track of all these damn platforms. But somebody posts it there, and I still get emails from people commenting under it. And because there may be ways to block it and limit people, and I don't know, it's not my channel, other people are posting it. But because of the dynamics of anonymity, the loudest people are usually the complete assholes. So there's several mentally unstable assholes that constantly comment under my videos, and I'm sure some of them are going to comment under this one when it lands on BitChute, and they just have these random tirades because they're sheltered from any actual repercussions from being assholes, which in real life, if you're an asshole to all your neighbors, there are repercussions, even if they just not necessarily they punch you out. It may just be they have nothing to do with you. They don't talk to you. They don't hire you. They don't have anything to do with you. And you can go be an asshole in the woods by yourself or something. But it's unfortunate that those people sort of get to be the de facto representatives of, so this is the philosophical discussion about these concepts, is these just obnoxious jerks yelling at each other back and forth. And so that's going to turn off most normal people who look into it. And so one step up, like pretty big step up from that, is like freedom events like Porkfest or Anarchapulco, and where people are in person and already people are like way more polite and way less obnoxious because they're around other people who can say like get lost and disassociate with them. So that's way less rude and obnoxious, but it still isn't really reality. That's a bunch of people who like to philosophize and discuss things, which is awesome. Like I'm in that group. That's not it's not an insult, but that's still not a representation of what it looks like when normal people out in the real world who are like living their lives hear about these ideas and think about them and talk to other people about them, which you don't see. And the thing is, those are the discussions that actually matter, because those are the discussions that have an impact on all the people who aren't already on board. Like, yeah, there are benefits and it's fun to be around a bunch of like-minded people and talk about these things and all that. But if we don't get through to a lot of normal people, we're kind of doomed. Like, we can sit in a corner and tell each other how right we are till the tanks show up. That's not my goal. I would like the whole world to give this up. But the representation at these events, while way less rude and obnoxious than like some random, blockchain place where everybody can comment whatever they want and it stays there forever, and it can just be slander and rude and idiotic and whatever, and it just stays there. Like, the events are way less obnoxious, but they're still not a real representation of the real world and how people actually think and talk and act. And I've said this before, but I want to say it again to make sure I offend as many people as possible. When it comes to the discussion of anarchism, I think a whole lot of people who identify as anarchists are not people I want to live around. Some of them are, some of them definitely are, but a whole lot of them, no, I would happily exercise my freedom of disassociation and get as far away from them as possible. Whether they're obnoxious assholes or they're so obsessed, like they don't have a life, they can't do anything, they don't know how to do anything productive, they don't actually have real relationships, they sit around on a computer and whine at people, and that's their entire existence. Like they don't know how to do productive things. I would much rather live my life in a world surrounded by a bunch of people who have lives and they do things and they have families and they care about people and they have like stable relationships and they're productive, and sometimes we can have discussions about statism and hopefully they'll give up the superstition of authority and then be decent human beings. And that's the discussion, and that's the population that matters in the long run on a practical basis. Those are the people that will change the world. The tiny group of people who like to think and philosophize, and that's like almost all they do, their job, and I'm saying I sort of put myself in that group at least half the time, their job is to try to get the rest of the world hearing this, and most of them suck at it. Some of them suck at it just because of, human psychology gets in the way and they haven't learned the best ways to talk to other people. Some of them suck at it because they're like Aspergery, antisocial, obnoxious assholes. And assholes tend to not be the best ambassadors for any message. And so it's sort of frustrating to watch the discussion mostly happening among groups and in ways that aren't that useful, and that the average normal person onlooker would go, "Ugh, what the hell? Like, I don't really want to have anything to do with that." And so a whole lot of people who identify as anarchists are some of the best ambassadors for normal people not wanting anarchism, because if they associate it with those people, like, oh, I went to this group and there was a bunch of obnoxious weirdos and half of them were saying they were commies and then screaming, and the occasional like stupid white nationalist imbeciles show up and like yelling at each other and what the hell, like, okay, is that the world we can expect without a ruling class? No, it isn't. That's the world we already expect, where you have online platforms where there's anonymity and there's like free exchange. People can say whatever they want. Again, there is a use to that, and I'm glad those places exist, but that's a crappy place for normal people to learn about the ideas. And the thing is, normal people learning about voluntaryism, they don't have all the weird philosophical nitpickings that a bunch of obsessive, even voluntarists, seem to harp on over and over again and do this weird competition of like, oh, well, you said this, but in your terminology of this, unless you have this and have a complete explanation of that, you have to blah, 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 blah. And so we're going to nitpick forever about the finer points of everything with all the other people philosophizing over in this corner. And it's like, okay, you can do that. And I'm actually all in favor of people like nitpicking about everything and looking at the finer details of everything. But to normal people, if you're not starting with the basics in a way that just sounds like kind of a civilized, calm discussion that normal people can follow and understand, and that doesn't look like a brawl, like it's just going to scare them away and they don't care. And that's why, again, in a lot of cases, I would rather talk to some random statist than to talk to some random anarchist. It's not always true, but it's true pretty dang often, because there's lots of normal people who they don't want to have to bother to think about politics or philosophy, and I totally sympathize. Like, they have other things in their lives. They have lives. They're productive. They do things. They have families and relationships and stuff. And my ultimate goal is to have it so that nobody ever needs to think about this stupid garbage ever again, because we all outgrew superstition of authority, and now we can just like live our lives and focus on things that actually matter. And I think a lot of normal people may actually have an easier time of that than a lot of people who already describe themselves as anarchists, but who do this perpetual nitpicking, and it's like, who can be the most awesome, and here's why my philosophy is better than his. And like, if you actually have a point and have an idea and want to discuss ideas, that's fine. But there's this weird, like, people form little cliques, and this group doesn't like that person because he believes this, and they will dive on anybody who disagrees with, like, every time I say, like, oh, Jordan Peterson said this smart thing, or Russell Brand said this smart thing. Oh, but he's a statist and he was married to... Like, who do you think that's going to help to understand anything? Like, I'm perfectly fine with people I mean, I do it almost every single time. I say, yeah, this person still believes in statism, he still advocates government, but at least he understood blah, blah, blah. So I qualify it to make it clear. I'm not saying I agree with him on everything, but I'm glad this person, like, understands this and is expressing that. It's cool. I say it about Joe Rogan. I say it about Jimmy Dore. You know, far left, far right, whatever. I don't care where they came from on the statist spectrum. If it looks like they're honest and well-intentioned and, like, noticing some of the ridiculousness, cool, then let's have the discussion. And the people who are more concerned with, we're in the in crowd that's right about everything, like, what do you think you're accomplishing by that? And there's, you know, almost any group, any individual that has any audience, me or anybody else, and my audience is still like, you know, puny little percentage of the population, but I already have like my collection of bitter little haters, most of whom their whininess is based on things I didn't even say or argue. Like, they literally just hallucinate stuff to complain about. And I see them do that with everybody else. This isn't unique to me. Anybody who gets any recognition, I see tons of people trying to drag them down. It's the crabs in a bucket thing. If you haven't heard it, look it up. Of trying to drag down anybody who has even a tiny little bit of recognition. Now, if you want to say, oh, that's like, you know, Dave Smith, I think, is hilarious, and he says a bunch of things that's really useful. There's some things that I think he's colossally totally wrong on. So he's still right about stuff, and he's funny, and he does a good job of getting people to think about stuff. And I can disagree with him about other stuff, but I don't have to say he should be shunned and hated and everybody should talk like he's the devil. Like, no, and I don't say that about Russell Brand, and a bunch of people have tantrums at me because I don't condemn him because he was once in a relationship with the granddaughter of a nephew of a third cousin of the maid of some Rothschild. Like, shut up. If people don't know how to talk to other people like normal people, then you're not spreading the message to the people who need to understand it. And if you nitpick about every little detail before you have even gotten to the general concepts, when it comes to talking to the general public, like, what do you think that's accomplishing? It's ridiculous. And I mean, it seems to just be a human thing that people form cliques, and we're in religion, like all over the place. You know, I could use Christianity as one example. Well, now there's this branch and this branch, and this branch says they're totally evil and going to hell because they think they talk as if the Trinity is three different things, whereas we're going to heaven and we're brilliant and righteous because we talk about it as one thing, and they're saying you're evil because you talk. And literally there's like violent conflicts and condemnation all over the place, and it goes split after split because people are doing the pack mentality thing, not because they're trying to understand anything, because rarely do they actually like have a discussion. Now, some people do, but they're not in on those battles. They say, well, here's what I believe. You know, now I'm not even a Christian, but somebody can say, well, I look at the doctrines and I believe it means this. Okay. And somebody else can say, well, I believe it means this. And they can actually have like a rational, polite discussion, even if they still disagree at the end of the day. But there's a whole lot of the movement that they're determined to forever focus on things to nitpick about instead of having people understand. Like, I just did the video talking about how I don't really need to give a specific definition of morality to have most of the world on board with the general things of don't attack other people. And people are like, but there are gray areas. Yeah, I know there are gray areas. I mentioned those gray areas. And those gray areas of, well, when does it count as theft or something, are way less important than the fact that the vast majority of the population of the world still advocates widespread extortion and violence and warmongering and thuggery and murder by way of government. You're like, yeah, but I'd rather nitpick about these gray areas and how we exactly define. Really? So 99% of the problem is something that all of these people could be on the same side of. Yeah, there'll be an occasional psychopath. We all know that. We know that. They know that. And, you know, for those people, we have to be able to defend ourselves. But the vast majority of the population is trying to be the good guys, and they're trying to get along. They still have disagreements. There's still gray areas. But even under that video where I'm just saying, most people know how to peacefully coexist, except they're taught an exception when it comes to government, and so they advocate violent aggression by way of politics because they've been taught that it's okay and it's legitimate and it's even necessary when violent aggression is legally done. And so I just want them to change that, stop believing in that exception, because for the most part, lots of people can get along fine. And then a number of pro-freedom people are diving in. No, we have to agree to every little scintilla and the tiniest little minutia of theoretical. Before what? Like, you can discuss that all you want. Right now, there's one colossal mistake. And it's almost like, you know, somebody comes into a doctor's office. Oh, you have a spear stuck in you. Maybe we should, like, get the spear out and stitch you up and try to put you back together. Somebody else goes, no, that's not good enough because he stubbed his toe and he has an earache and the spear is kind of the main thing that matters right now. No, you can't take the spear out because if you still have a stubbed toe while the spear, it was just so weird to watch and so colossally stupid, especially since almost none of the responses had anything to do with the point of the video, which is the primary thing that keeps lots and lots, billions of people from peacefully coexisting is the belief in government. Now, there are other things people disagree about. There are other things that will still lead to conflict and even violent conflict on occasion. It'll be nowhere near the level of violent confrontation that results from everybody's belief in government, but there will still be problems. But the people who are just like so determined to nitpick every detail that they won't even say, yeah, maybe let's try to get people to understand thou shalt not steal, including by way of law. Like, I want the world to understand that. And by the way, the world isn't all Christian, but almost every religion has their version of don't steal from people. And sometimes they'll have exceptions for, well, you're allowed to steal from them. And everybody who believes in government believes in the exception of, well, if you can legally rob your neighbor, then it's perfectly okay. I want them to not believe that thing. And all these people like obsessively whining in their basements about, now we're going to nitpick about every detail and whine about anybody who doesn't agree with us on every single detail and declare them to be an evil shill and controlled opposition, which I've seen them do to everybody, including me. Oh, you think the earth is spherical? Obviously, you're controlled opposition. Christ. So all of that going on is just a big anchor tied to the attempt to get people to give up the primary threat to humanity and peace, which is the belief in authority. Because, and I've talked about this before, a lot of people, their goal is not to win. The goal is not to end statism. The goal is not peaceful coexistence. The goal is to be in the fight. And I won't mention any names, but some of the people who jumped to the alt-right, white nationalist idiocy were prime examples of, for a while you pretended to be voluntarist and you explained the principles well, but then when that wasn't edgy enough and that didn't get you enough attention, then you jumped over into this racist pack mentality statist idiocy because you, and some of you can probably guess who I'm talking about, but there's a number of people this describes, they weren't about the principle. They weren't actually going for peaceful coexistence. They wanted attention. They wanted to seem edgy. They wanted to be in the minority. And so they're like anybody whose agenda is not the truth, like they're not somebody you really want as an ally because they're going to sabotage it the moment they think that going some different direction might get them more attention and more shock value and maybe more funding and more like cult worship, cult of personality crap. And it's weird and it's sad to watch. So here's my appeal. If you're not somebody who has an audience of any size in the freedom movement, you're a voluntarist, but like almost nobody except your friends like even know that, and you probably have a better chance of actually making a difference having one-on-one discussions with normal people out there than a whole lot of the slighter, a little bit well-known people in the movement who are bickering with each other and tearing each other down and, we're going to whine about this nitpicky thing. Again, you can discuss ideas and you can explain, like I do this too, you can explain why you think that idea is, but the whole, that person is evil, let's all group together and make our little clique over here that focuses on how evil that, it's like, good Lord, are you all 6 or something? Like, can't you kind of go above that? And there's the saying that I forget the exact quote. Basically, the worse people talk about people, the better level talk about events, and the ones who actually make a difference are the people who talk about ideas. And I actually think normal voluntarists who are just people who have actual lives and actual relationships and know how to be productive and they know how to build stuff and grow stuff or program stuff or something useful to humanity, their entire focus isn't whining about this stuff. I would much rather be around them, and those are actually the people who are going to save the world. It's not the people hiding in a corner yelling at each other, nitpicking about some weird thing that the rest of the world, A, doesn't care about, and B, wouldn't understand if they heard it. So it's, once again, gonna say this again. I think every time I say this, more and more people seem to go, oh, that's what you mean by that. The world is going to give up the belief in statism mostly in spite of the freedom movement, not because of it. So if you're one of the people who's like focused on being a decent human being and you want to talk to people about that, outstanding. And just know that even if you don't have an audience and you don't have people praising you, you're probably making more of a positive difference having random chats with family members and coworkers than a whole bunch of these people yelling in a corner at each other who are all about the arguing and not about the actual outreach to get the rest of the world to accept some pretty basic, obvious truths about how all human interaction ideally should be by consent, like voluntary instead of coercive. So it's weird to watch. And for those of you, the last thing I'll say is don't get too discouraged when you watch some of the people who are all about arguing and yelling with each other in the comment section under something, and they're bickering about weird stuff, and they're half the time they're bickering about stuff they just imagined rather than what the other person actually said. Like, that doesn't matter. That's just kind of noise. What matters is the discussions that are going to slowly seep into mainstream culture and are going to seep into the rest of the world till all the normal, decent people who, like, try to be nice and things like that learn these concepts and talk to other people about them, and it spreads more and more. And I'm sure we can still have people sitting in a corner somewhere screaming at each other about how you didn't quite have the right nuance on this little thing. It's like, okay, whatever, have fun with that. But the overall gist of what we need humanity to understand first and foremost is pretty damn simple. Like, there's plenty of nitpicking to do for the rest of humanity. Right now, just a very basic grasp on the concept of self-ownership, that's what the world needs. And the people who are determined to argue about minutiae and trivialities to the point that they're literally doing nothing to actually spread even that most basic foundational idea to the rest of the world, they don't stinking matter. They're not the ones who are going to fix the world. You are, by just being a decent person and occasionally talking to people you know about these things. So anyway, I hope that that was sort of a weird sideways pep talk, because I don't want you to be discouraged by seeing all the stupid noise that's going to be posted. And there'll be stupid noise posted under this on BitChute as soon as anybody puts it there. But what's really happening in the real world is real people who have lives are talking to other real people who still believe in government until they don't anymore. And that's happening all over the place. And that's what actually matters. That's what changes the world. The noise in the background, don't be discouraged and scared by that. It doesn't matter. In the long run, it'll all be forgotten and will make no stinking difference. The actual concepts of freedom will spread one little discussion at a time, from this person to that person. Yeah, sometimes there's a book and there's a video that like a whole bunch of people will see, but a whole lot of it is just going to be little one-on-one discussions with people having honest, heartfelt discussions with the people they know, trying to describe for them and explain how, yeah, I figured out that government isn't really compatible with what I believe because it's always coercive, and I think we can organize and cooperate on a voluntary, nonviolent basis. And having other people go, that's how we change the world. Not bickering in a corner and whining about this guy doesn't quite believe the... So, yeah, the world's going to change. And all you little nobodies, you're the ones who are going to make that happen. And the whiny, bickering people in the corner, they're not. And in the end, they don't stinking matter. And you do. So don't be discouraged and don't give up and don't slow down. Because even if you feel like, oh, I'm just making this tiny little contribution or a bigger contribution, whatever, when thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people are doing that, that's pretty much how society has always progressed. By people talking and talking and talking to other people until the mentality of the entire species evolves into something more humane and rational and moral. So keep doing that and don't be too terrified or discouraged by all the idiot noise going on in the background.